$200,000. At one point, that is how much money you could potentially earn competing solely in virtual reality esports competitions. The VR Challengers League was once the biggest VR Esports League on the entire planet, pulling in major brand deals, making careers, and having over 6-figure prize pools. This thing was the gorilla tag of VR esports, an absolute titan with nobody to stand in its way. And if that was the case, then how come we don't see it today? What happened in the couple years that the VR Challengers League was in its limelight that eventually caused it to reach its eventual downfall? All that and more, coming right up. So in order for us to understand this league's downfall, we will first have to understand its uprising. The earliest records show that the VR Challenger League first started gaining traction and was started around 2017, and it was announced as a partnership between Oculus and ESL. For those of you who don't know, ESL is actually one of the biggest esports organizations out there, organizing many of the popular leagues that you see today such as CSGO and Rainbow Six Siege. And Oculus, now Meta, was one of the biggest VR underdogs in the entire market, launching headsets such as the Rift S and then soon to be the Quest 1. And on July 12, 2017, Oculus had announced on their blog that they are now opening the VR Challenger League bracket for anybody to compete. And picking up another giant sponsor in Intel, they were able to total their prize pool to over $200,000, meaning for the top 8 competitors who climb past league play, the regionals, and then finally to the finals, they will have a chance to receive life-changing money, all for just being good at a very niche virtual reality game. And speaking of which, another question is presented: which games should be the ones who hold the tournament to receive this $200,000 prize? After discussing internally and throwing up different ideas, they ended up settling on 2 games. First, the Unspoken, and then everybody's favorite zero-gravity disc game, Echo Arena. But the big corporations' funding wasn't the only thing that the VR Challenger League took advantage of. Locations such as Oculus Connect and ESL One, and even places like DreamHack, were respectively utilized in order to hold their own grand finals. And for the small majority of people who had doubts as to if the VR Challenger League would actually succeed, most of them were silenced when the actual grand finals took place at the different conventions. And even with just a quick search of VR Esports on the YouTube browser, the millions of views and exposure infatuated many as to what VR Esports would look like at its peak, with some of the stream VODs even being some of the most popular videos on VR YouTube. So if all of these provided massive amounts of success, then how did the league itself actually fall? Well, firstly, I'd have to bring you back to one of the games mentioned in the finals, Unspoken. Around the time that the VR League was hosting Unspoken tournaments, it was relatively known in the VR community that Unspoken didn't really have as much numbers in terms of player count as games such as, let's say, Echo Arena. And due to that, they decided that they would try and swindle the Unspoken community out of their prizes by changing their website and denying any wrongdoing. However, what they didn't expect was how fast the community would catch on to the change in prices, and most people would start an uproar that would eventually lead to them reversing the result and going from a changed prize of $525 a week to a grand final at Oculus Connect 5. And while ESL and Oculus did take a bit of a reputation hit, the issue that would truly lead the league to its inescapable demise had to do with the choices made by the actual companies themselves. See, with Oculus and ESL both having specializing in different parts of VR esports, the two companies only meddled in parts that they actually specialized in, meaning that Oculus was usually the provider of the VR headsets and making sure the hardware was up and good to go, while ESL actually took the liberty of organizing, finding casters, and promoting the league itself. But with an interview by famed VR YouTuber Get Hip with another caster who actually worked for the VR League at that time, we are able to learn that a lot of the staff and workplace in ESL was very toxic.
Apparently in ESL, like the kind of culture they've developed, which I've heard is pretty toxic from women who've had to deal with it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That the guys try to establish this kind of hierarchy and that they all have to be kind of to whoever the new guy is and that you're supposed to be like suck up to them or something like that. I was like, this guy's 20, I'm 37, and he's 5'2" and I'm 6'5". Yeah, that's not happening.
And after profit margins were smaller than expected, ESL soured their ties with Oculus and eventually dissolved the VR Challengers League, which finally put an end to the peak of VR esports. And since most of the downfall was due to internal company problems as stated, it really makes you wonder, could there be another league, or company, or sponsorship, or partnership that could take VR back to its glory days? We can only wait and see.